Hello and welcome to part 6 of this series. Today we'll be talking about dictionaries. And so, what exactly are dictionaries? Do they have something to do with vocabulary as well? Well, not really, but it helps to map two different values to each other. So, you can map a string to a value, or a value to a string, or so on and so forth. Or you can map two strings together. But the first thing that we got to do to create a dictionary is create a variable. And this is a reoccurring idea within Python. First thing to do at all times is to create a variable so you can store what you're trying to create. And the only exception to this idea is using maybe some sort of command, such as deleting something, or you're trying to change up something using the pop, the del, the remove functions, or you're trying to append using the append function, so on and so forth. In those cases, you don't have to create a variable, but in the rest cases, in these cases, you kind of have to. So let's say, for example, I want to take the value or take three different languages and I want to map them to a certain value. Let's say I want to take Python, C++, and Java and then map them to a certain numerical value. I can do this using lists. So I'm just going to title this lang, short for languages, and then open my curly brackets. And this is what defines it as a dictionary rather than a list or um, something else. And I can type in my values, Python. So this is my string, my first string. And then I want to give it the value of 1. So I got to use my colon to say that I'm mapping Python to the value 1. And then you can type in C++, for example. Whoops. And then map that to 2. And then type in, forgot the comma, which is really important. Don't forget the commas. These are really important because they show where it needs to be separated. And then lastly, I have Java, and then I'm going to set that equal to 3. So you might have noticed that I used a bunch of indents and returns. You are allowed to do that with dictionaries or even lists and so on and so forth, as long as you have the comma. It's just the aesthetic choice that you would like to take. This looks nicer and easier to read. Um, so if I were to run it, it'll show me that you know, it was able to run it with no errors because I didn't print anything. There we go. It just finished running it. So let's print it out just to see how it looks. Print lang, which is our dict, meaning dictionary. That's our data type. So now when I run it, I get this. So personally, I don't like using the enters, so I'm gonna just remove them. But I wanted to show you guys that that's possible, and it's just based upon aesthetic and how you like to create your dictionaries or lists and so on and so forth. But I like it this way. And now, what can we do with this dictionary? So let's say, for example, I want to get the value of Python. I know that the value is 1, but throughout my program, I needed to capture it because we already have a dictionary that says Python is 1, and the program is written so that if the value of Python changes, if you change the dictionary value, it will also change that value. So how do we do that? Well, let's create another variable so we know that we know what to um, put the 1 value into. So I'm going to type in Py, just short for Python. Just for fun, you can put whatever variable you want. And in order to get the value for 1, I need to define the dictionary that I'm using, so lang, and use the dot, and then type in get. So we're using the get function, and then we're going to type in what we want to get. So we want to get Python. Now, if I were to print out pi, right? So this will give us a value, at the end of the day. If I were to print it out, I should be able to get the value 1. That's because it is already mapped to 1. So if we were to type in C++ here, for example, I should get 2. and then so on and so forth, which I do here. I get two right here. So that's kind of nice to be able to just have that in the program. Um, a use case scenario might be, let's say I want a user input and I'm going to ask them what is your favorite language, and then I want it to print out, hey, whatever the number that's associated with it. Let's say those are rankings for the most used languages, and I want to tell them, hey, that Python is used the most or C++ is used the second, but what language do you use, and I'll tell you the ranking. So we can do that using the input function, but first, like I said, you gotta create some sort of variable. So this is their preference or language. So I'm just going to type in pref, for preference language. It's always nice to be able to name your variables so that it makes sense to you. So name it what you like to name it so that you actually understand it. Okay, so now I'm going to create an input. First, I want to make sure that this is a string. I know that it will be, but I like to always make sure that it is a string because we know that our value here for Python and whatnot are strings. So input, whoops, accidentally capitalize that. And like I did there, my mistake with capitalizing input or anything else, that can actually compromise everything. So make sure that you have your capitalizations correct. Um, Most of the functions and data types are all lowercase, but once you get into true or false, the Boolean statements, those are capital. So that's kind of important to remember. That's a side note right there. Let's say, what is your favorite language? Okay, and then I'm gonna use my colon just to separate that out. Okay, and now over here, I can change this to pref. So what it will do is it'll take your input, and so for example, let's say you type in C++ or whatnot, and it will take that and turn it into a string and save it in the pref, and then you have your dictionary here, and then afterwards, what it will do is since you have the py variable here, let's just say rank. Let's change this to rank because now we know that we are ranking our languages. Um, it will get the pref value, whatever we saved. So in this case, let's say we were typing Python in, it will get that value and then it'll get it from the dictionary and it'll save it in rank and then it'll print out rank. Okay, so let's run it and show you how it works. Okay, sorry about that. So if I type in Python and run it, I get the value of 1 back. And it's also important that you have your your strings case sensitive because it tries to equate it exactly. So if I were to type in Python exactly straight, I would get none, meaning that there is no definition for it, so it doesn't work out. That's important. And also up top here, I got none because I had some issues running the program, which can happen. Um, but all notes apart, that's kind of important that you make everything case sensitive, and it actually works that way.